So in addition to learning all these things, it's good to be aware of how to maybe do this as a part of your education, even at a PhD level, and see which place is actually doing it. So the concept of rooted universities then becomes critical. There are places doing that, and it's been a practice, for example, in agricultural universities where extension happens from research to field sites to actual farmers and so on. But now we are talking about a much broader scale of climate change mitigation and adaptation at various local scales. So if the university is there, obviously it wants to be known worldwide, do world-class research, but what role can it play in place-based research, education, community engagement, and green infrastructure? So that nexus is kind of discussed here. So this is the figure from the Bioregional Center for Sustainability Science, Planning and Design. You can see that this has efforts 1, 2, 3, and 4. So this rooted university idea wants to strengthen civil society and democracy in research, planning, and design for development that is verdant, carbon neutral, healthy, and regeneratively sustainable and just. So regeneration is basically not taking things away and leaving things dead, but actually regenerating the resources that are using, typically resources. Develop knowledge, skills, tools, models, and ethics needed for place-based sustainability research and climate action planning. So it goes from actually developing knowledge at these kind of field scales, for example, and establishing skills, tools, models, and ethical considerations for sustainability as well as climate action planning. The third effort, there is advancing the rooted university transition to help eradicate root causes of poverty. That's a big mandate, but it's a good goal. Environmental degradation may be easier, and unhealthy living conditions, again, there are behavioral aspects that are related to poverty and food quality and so on that have to be dealt with. Improve research communication and storytelling that addresses the impacts, risks, and vulnerabilities posed by climate change disruption. So awareness campaign as well. Okay. The fourth effort is to conduct convergence research, where actually the nexus of green, cyber, and civic infrastructures are brought together. So civil engineers will do things that are good for civic infrastructure, taking care of various aspects, including maybe mixed neighborhoods to reduce vehicle miles traveled. But how do you combine it with green infrastructure and cyber infrastructure, like the concept of smart cities these days, for example? Do smart cities also only have to be about using technology for better communication, traffic flow, energy use, etc., or can they also be part of the green infrastructure? Build urban-rural relationship for a climate-friendly future. This is critical pretty much everywhere and maybe not getting enough attention yet. So the rooted university and community development has 3 place-based challenges that are specifically important for the imagination, ethics, and practice of rootedness. Okay, place-based is again taking into account the bioregionalism, the natural world and the human world and their interactions. Rebuilding urban and rural communities on a human scale, to nurture a healthy sense of place, secure attachments, and rootedness among community inhabitants, coupling human and natural systems in ways that holistically and equitably instill eco-efficiency, resilience, and green cultural values into just systems of production, consumption, and daily life. So the concepts like resilience and vulnerability are not always easy to define in terms of metrics to track that your action, localization, and bioregionalism are actually increasing resilience. You need some evidence for that. So they may need quantitative metrics which have to be developed, which also will be local. Similarly for vulnerability. Okay. Making known and valuing how wildlands, water bodies, and working landscapes, ecological services, and rural livelihoods enable cities to exist. So cities can become completely disconnected from the rest of the surroundings, even locally, other than maybe going out for a nature drive on a weekend or something. But actually there is a day-to-day interaction, communication, and interdependence that we looked at before that is important for considering in this context of green infrastructure and rootedness nexus. Culminating idea in the chapter is called the green infrastructure nexus. So the bioenergy microgrid, for example, that we looked at integrates three infrastructures. That's a good example of the nexus. Green, including urban agriculture and food forestry that benefits from the output of food waste to soil and energy systems, and solar power generation. Green infrastructure nexus can also look at civic infrastructure, which includes institutional channels for students, faculty, staff, and community input, plus citizen science. So citizen science is a concept like crowdsourcing data combining with citizen science can actually give them a sense of engagement or sense of being a part of the solution. Okay, people, when they are aware of risk but don't know how to actually directly contribute, they can actually lose hope and become just disappointed, or take the wait and see approach to see, let's see how long it is before it starts affecting me directly. Whereas if the risk is associated with these kind of rootedness, which can give them ways to play a role through crowdsourced data gathering and citizen science, then they really feel as a part of the solution. Cyber infrastructure, including hardware and software for data integration and visualization, spatial analytics, monitoring, integrated modeling and assessment, scenario planning, and so on. So sounds like a lot of jargon, but as we saw in the case of integrated regional water management for California, localization requires local data, local bioregionalism, and localization of green infrastructure, etc. So cyber infrastructure in that sense can play a great role in local data, local visualization, spatial analytics. So region specificity is really, really important to get effective solutions in the localization and green infrastructure nexus context. So NSF, the National Science Foundation in the US, has a funding that's called Smart and Connected Communities, which funds place-based research, where the research design must engage community as participants while generating new knowledge that can be used to synergistically integrate intelligent technologies with natural and built environments, including infrastructure, to improve the social, economic, and environmental well-being of those who live, work, and travel within this community. This is especially critical because the US continues to have ups and downs in terms of even accepting climate change, being part of the international efforts like Paris Agreement, and you know that Trump walked out of it, US disengaged, but now Biden will try to engage again. But the credibility matters in that case for partners who are trying to work with the global community. But these kind of rootedness, localization, green infrastructure can produce climate action without upsetting these people who somehow don't like climate change. So solutions are still possible, and as the global commitment, global engagement keeps struggling or has ups and downs, localization can still make huge advances in bending the curve from a country that is so skeptical about climate change. That's critical to remember, that this gives a advantage of keeping the action going